the weight of the stone. Here's what you need to understand about Deborah Winslow. She was 15 years old in September of 1987. She owned exactly one cassette tape that she'd paid for herself, Def Leppard's Hysteria, purchased at the Kirksville Palmeda with her own babysitting money. And she had never, not once in her entire life, backed down from a dare. That last part is the important part. That last part is what put her in the chair. Carla Roten was the one who'd suggested it, which was funny because Carla was the careful one. The one who read the library books about things before she decided to be scared of them. The one who'd spent 3 afternoons that week digging up everything she could find about the chair before she'd worked up the nerve to dare Deborah to sit in it. Carla was taller by half a head and kept her dark hair in a braid she'd pull over one shoulder when the anxiety got going, which it was doing now, the braid coming forward like some nervous animal seeking shelter. They were walking through the iron gate of Highland Park Cemetery, the September night cool and full of that particular smell. Dead leaves and turned earth, and something else underneath, something you couldn't name but recognized anyway, deep in the lizard part of your brain that still remembered what the dark used to hold. "You don't have to do this," Carla said, though even she could hear the lack of muscle in it. "Nobody's going to think less of you." She paused. "Well, Rob might, but Rob thinks professional wrestling is real, so I'm not sure his opinion counts for a whole lot." Deborah almost smiled. "You dared me," she said. "I said yes, that's all there is to it." She was carrying her father's old maglite, the heavy one that felt like a weapon because that's basically what it was, and she ran the beam across the headstones as they went deeper in, names and dates flaring briefly in the light, and then gone. Ezra Foltz, 1847 to 1901. Margaret Ware, beloved wife. The stones leaned in places, tilting toward each other the way old people do at a party when they want to talk without being overheard, and the hackberry trees moved slowly in a wind that felt colder than it should have. Carla's cousin Rob had drawn them a map on the side of a paper bag, the kind of artistic rendering that suggested he'd done this before and enjoyed being the one who sent other people into places he wouldn't go to himself. He'd said you couldn't miss it. And for once in his limited and largely useless life, Rob Roten was absolutely right. The chair was just there. The way a bad thing sometimes is, not sneaking up on you but simply present, as if it had been waiting in that exact spot not for years, but for always, for some time before time started keeping records. It was bigger than Deborah had imagined, carved out of concrete by a man named Charles Grassel back in 1911. Him and his partner David Baird running the Baird and Grassel Granite Works right there in Kirksville, Missouri. Grassel had made the chair as a memorial for Anna Maria Hoyer Baird, David's wife, who died that year, and he'd made it to last, and it had. The arms curved inward in a way that might have suggested welcome, in a different light, in a different hour. Here, now, in the sweep of the maglite, they suggested something else. Deborah didn't let herself think too hard about what. There was a flat marker at the base. Anna Maria Baird, David Baird. David had followed his wife into the ground just 1 year later, 1912, and so the chair Grassel had shaped with his hands as a memorial for one had become the grave marker for two. People called it the Devil's Chair, and had called it that for decades, the kind of name that gets attached to things in small towns, the way barnacles attach to old wood. Its real name was the Baird Chair. Deborah thought about that distinction and thought it mattered, though she couldn't have said exactly why. Not yet. "The legend says a hand comes up from the ground," Carla said, her voice about half its normal volume. "Drags you down. Some versions say the devil himself shows up to reclaim his throne." She was pulling that braid so hard that Deborah was mildly concerned about her circulation. Other versions say nothing bad happens at all, that it's just a chair. "Which version do you believe?" Deborah asked. Carla looked at the chair, and then back at Deborah. "I believe it's 11:58, she said, "and that I'm going to stand exactly 20 feet back and count to 5 minutes, and that if anything comes up out of that ground, I'm going to run and I'm not going to feel bad about it." "Fair enough," Deborah said, and walked up to the chair. She put her hand on the arm first, the way you test a radiator before you lean against it. The concrete was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the night air, a cold that seemed to be coming from somewhere below the ordinary temperature of things, stored up and patient, and for 1/2 second, something moved in the back of her mind, that ancient lizard brain thing firing off its little warning flare. She took her hand away, rubbed it on her jeans, put it back down because she wasn't going to give Carla anything to tell Rob about. Then she sat, and the cold climbed her spine like something alive. It spread across her shoulders and settled in her chest, that deep, concrete cold, and the silence around the chair was not quite the same silence as the rest of the cemetery. This was a considered silence, if such a thing was possible, the kind that made you feel that the air around you had developed an interest in you, specifically. She gripped the arms of the chair and kept her eyes forward, on the dark rows of stones, the tilting hackberry trees, the absolute and specific blackness between the graves. 1 minute, Carla called, and her voice was doing its level best to sound casual and failing completely. Deborah held herself still and thought about Charles Grassel, which surprised her, because she'd expected to be thinking about the darkness, or about whether she was about to die, or at the very least about the Def Leppard concert she'd been planning to watch on MTV when she got home. Instead, she was thinking about Grassel at his granite works, shaping this chair with his hands, making something for a man whose wife had just died, something permanent and solid that said she was here, this mattered, she was loved. There was no darkness in that. Whatever darkness the stories had layered on top of it over the years, the thing underneath was just that, a man doing the best work he knew how to do for a grief he understood. 2 minutes, Carla said, and the waver in her voice had gotten worse. The hackberry trees moved. The silence pressed. The cold sat in Deborah's bones like something that intended to stay, and she let it, the way you let a doctor's hand press somewhere sore because you know the pressing is the point. 3 minutes, Carla whispered. 4. 5. A long pause, and then Carla's voice came back louder, cracked wide open with relief she wasn't bothering to hide. Deb, 5 minutes. Get up. Please get up. Deborah sat for a few seconds longer, not because of stubbornness, though Lord knew she had enough of that to spare. She sat because she wanted to finish the thought, the one about Grassel, and the chair, and the name that was its real name. The Baird chair. Not the Devil's chair. Never really that. Just 2 people's grave marker and 1 man's careful, lasting answer to loss. Then she stood, and the night air met her like the ordinary world reasserting itself, and she walked to where Carla stood with her eyes too wide and her braid white-knuckled in her fist. Well, Carla managed. Was it terrible? Did you feel anything? Deborah looked back at the Baird chair once, solid and still and older than any story anybody'd ever hung on it, and then she looked at her best friend and she said, cold. It was just cold and sad and quiet, and none of those things are the devil's. Then she turned for the gate, and Carla fell into step beside her, and neither of them ran, which was the part of the story Deborah always told last, years later, because it was the part nobody ever quite believed.